Hi, I'm Marlene. My father banned me from my parents' anniversary party because he said I looked too poor. No warning, no apology. Just a closed door, while everyone else posed for pictures under chandeliers I paid for. What they didn't know? I was the silent name on the venue contract. The woman they cropped out of every family photo was the one holding the foundation together. But that night, everything changed. A leaked clip, a staged lie exposed. So how did I go from being erased to making the entire room freeze just by standing up? Let me take you back. It was a Wednesday evening in early spring when the envelope arrived. Thicker than usual, gold-foiled edges, the kind that promised elegance before it was even opened. I found it tucked neatly between a utilities bill and an ad for luxury retirement condos, as if it had been trying to sneak into my life unnoticed. The return address was unmistakable. My parents' house in North Scottsdale, the one with the polished stone driveway and the ornamental cacti that bloomed year-round because someone else tended them. I held the envelope in my hand for a long moment before walking inside. I set the mail on the kitchen counter, poured myself a glass of water, and peeled open the envelope slowly, half expecting to find something cold beneath all that shine. It was an invitation, embossed, scripted, meticulous. The Hayes family cordially invites you to the 40th wedding anniversary celebration of Sterling and Delphine Hayes. Formal attire, dinner, music, and legacy presentation to follow. I flipped it over, looking for something personal. A note, a line scrawled in my mother's handwriting. Anything that acknowledged I wasn't just receiving the invitation. I was part of the family it represented. But there was nothing. My name didn't appear in the list of honorees, organizers, or even RSVP contacts. And then, in smaller print at the bottom, Family Support Staff Logistics coordinated by M. Hayes. Support staff. Logistics. That was how they saw me. I sank into the bar stool at the end of the counter, the one I always sat in when I visited their house, the only one not covered in pristine white fabric. My fingers traced the corner of the card, not sure whether to laugh or tear it in half. I didn't. I just stared at it. This wasn't new. There'd been family events before, fundraisers, birthday dinners, holiday brunches, where my role had been more utility than guest. I was the one taking photos, picking up forgotten dry cleaning, making sure the caterer didn't forget the lactose-free menu for Aunt Pauline. Somewhere along the way, I'd been reassigned. Not daughter. Just function. Later that evening, I lay back on the couch, half watching the ceiling fan spin. I picked up my phone out of habit. Dozens of unread messages, mostly work-related. But there was one group thread lighting up near the top. Family Core Team. I tapped it open. Photos of floral arrangements, screenshots of seating charts, an RSVP list Leora had created in a color-coded spreadsheet. I wasn't in the thread. I wasn't even mentioned. But somehow, I'd been added to another group. Logistics Helpers, Tier 2. The kind of name that screamed backstage. I scrolled through the conversation. Messages about music choices, planned surprises for our parents, reminders to wear something brand presentable. My stomach turned. Leora had posted, "Please don't loop in Marlene on the core team thread. She's handling vendor coordination, not legacy moments." Legacy moments. The phrase rolled around in my head, bitter as aspirin without water. My throat tightened. Not because I wanted the spotlight, but because they always assumed I didn't deserve it. Not flashy enough, not loud enough, not like her. I locked my phone and set it face down on the coffee table. There was no point replying, no point raising my voice in a room where I'd already been muted. I walked out to the backyard, barefoot, the desert breeze brushing against my arms. The sunset in Arizona had always had a way of making things feel smaller. I stood at the edge of the patio, watching the horizon shift from gold to ember, and let the silence stretch. Maybe this was who I'd always been to them, the one who showed up early, stayed late, didn't ask for thanks. The one they knew would say, "It's fine," because she'd said it so many times. It became her name. Back inside, I poured a cup of herbal tea and curled up by the window. My laptop still open, work emails blinking, but I didn't touch them. Instead, I got up, walked to my home office, and opened the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet. I pulled out a folder labeled Property Contracts, Westfield Hall, the same venue printed on that gold-trimmed invitation. Inside were signed agreements, transfer schedules, silent partner clauses. I wasn't just on the guest list. I was the one who made the list happen. She just doesn't know I was the one who secured the entire venue. The weekend crept up quicker than I expected. By Saturday afternoon, I was pulling into the driveway of my parents' home, where the pre-party planning session was already in full swing. Sunlight shimmered off the massive windows of the house like a showroom display. That place never felt lived in, just perfectly arranged. Inside, the scent of lilies mingled with vanilla candles. Leora stood in the center of it all, directing people like a lifestyle guru on set. Her voice was gentle but insistent, her gestures polished. "Let's move the seating chart 1 foot left. Sterling's clients will want a direct view of the anniversary backdrop," she said, as if she'd been born wearing a headset. I hovered near the edge of the room, unnoticed at first. I watched as my cousins flipped through linen samples, my aunt debated dessert options, and someone from the catering company snapped photos of the staging area. The noise felt distant, even though I was standing right there. Delphine, my mother, finally noticed me. She walked over, brushing a stray curl from her perfectly sculpted cheek, and smiled like a realtor about to pitch a fixer-upper. "Oh, sweetheart," she started, linking her arm through mine like we were allies. "We just realized the bartending team is running short. Nothing major. But if you could jump in for an hour during cocktail hour, it would help us so much. You're always good with people." I blinked. "You want me to serve drinks at your anniversary party?" She let out a soft chuckle, like I'd made a joke. "Of course not, like a bartender. Just behind the bar for a bit. You'd wear the uniform, black shirt, logo apron. It's all very sleek, very on-brand." "On brand," I repeated. Her eyes flicked over my jeans and simple blouse. "Well, for the pictures, you know. We just want everything cohesive. It's a design language." I nodded, but my jaw tightened. My smile held, but not because I agreed. It was the smile you offer when someone insults you in a whisper. "I'll think about it," I said, pulling my arm back gently. I turned away before she could wrap the request in more soft-spoken condescension. A few minutes later, Leora was setting up a test shoot for lighting, the kind of thing she said would help the photographers plan the shots. She called out names like she was conducting a wedding rehearsal. "Dad, stand over here. Aunt Jamie, take 2 steps to the right. Oh, and Leo, hold Mom's hand." I stepped toward the group. Leora's voice faltered for half a beat, but then she smiled that practiced smile. "Oh," she said sweetly, "this one's just for media. We'll do another with everyone after." Another? There was never an after. There never had been. I didn't argue. I didn't roll my eyes. I just stepped back and watched as the flash went off, immortalizing yet another moment I wasn't in. An hour passed, maybe 2, I don't remember. At some point, I slipped out the sliding doors and into the backyard. The sun had dipped low, casting long shadows across the pavers. I found a spot on the stone steps that led to the garden, sat down, and took a breath. They kept my name off the invitation list, my face out of the family video. And now, my body was being gently escorted out of the frame. There was a pattern here, and I wasn't the one weaving it. I looked down at my hands. These were the same hands that signed the purchase agreement for Westfield Hall. The same hands that built what paid for their photo booths and floral walls. Hands that, in their world, were invisible unless holding a drink tray or a guest list. My phone buzzed. A calendar alert. "Final contract payment. Westfield Hall. Confirm by Monday 9 a.m. I tapped the notification. Approve. Just like that, the final payment cleared. The venue for my parents' grand celebration was officially theirs. Well, through the holding company that bore my initials. I didn't need a seat at their table. I owned the floor they were standing on. If they won't give me a seat, I'll bring the building. The slideshow email came just after 10 p.m. The subject line was almost cheerful. Final slideshow draft. Thoughts. The sender was Delphine, and it was the kind of thing that once might have made me hopeful. That maybe this time they'd remembered. I was curled up on my couch, glass of Cabernet half full, soft jazz trailing low from the Bluetooth speaker in the corner. My laptop sat open on the coffee table, casting a gentle glow over the room. For a second, I debated not opening it at all. But I did, because I already knew better than to expect anything different. The video file opened seamlessly. It was slick, professionally produced, loaded with slow transitions, emotional piano music, voiceovers, and golden lighting. I recognized the events instantly: birthday parties in the backyard, trips to Sedona, Thanksgiving dinners around the long oak table. And yet, my face was missing. After the age of 18, I was nowhere. There were shots I remembered clearly, because I had been the one taking them. In one clip, I caught a flash of my sleeve at the edge of the frame before it was wiped in a slow fade to Leora's glowing smile beside my father. Then Sterling's voice came in over a photo montage of him and Delphine, arms around Leora at some awards ceremony. This family has always stood strong, together. My stomach tightened. I sipped the wine, slow and deliberate. My fingers clenched the glass stem just a little too tightly. I didn't cry, not because I wasn't hurt, but because the pain had become a familiar rhythm. I knew this song by heart. Still watching, I pulled an old external drive from the drawer beside the couch and plugged it into my laptop. I navigated to the folder marked Family Events Originals. Inside were hundreds of JPEGs I'd scanned over the years, digitizing what our family never thought to preserve. There I was, front and center, in the original photo from their 30th anniversary, lighting the candles on the custom cake I'd ordered myself, unthanked. That same image in the slideshow now only featured the cake. Just the cake. They hadn't erased me. They'd just cropped me out. "You don't even have to delete me," I muttered, half to myself. "You just pretend I was never there." It was stunning in a way. The precision of their omission. The way they curated presence and absence so carefully, so publicly. Legacy wasn't about truth. It was about packaging. I opened a new folder on my desktop and titled it Undeniable. Then, one by one, I copied the original photos, every moment they'd hidden, from the archive and dropped them into the folder. I wasn't saving them as evidence. I was reclaiming memory. They might not see me, but I see me, and I'm still here. I sat there a while longer, letting that thought settle. Outside, the sky had turned velvet. Streetlights blinked on one by one across the neighborhood. Eventually, I walked to the closet and slid the door open. Hanging to the left was the dress I'd worn at their 30th anniversary. A soft navy, modest neckline, tailored just enough to feel like me. I took it down, held it to my chest, then folded it neatly and laid it next to the outfit I'd picked for the party in 3 days. Both simple, both deliberate. I wasn't changing for their cameras. I backed up the undeniable folder onto 3 cloud drives, just in case history decided to edit itself again. History can't hurt you if you take back the pen. Twilight stretched low across the Arizona sky as I pulled up to Westfield Hall. The parking lot glowed with the shimmer of polished chrome and rented elegance, black tie guests stepping out of luxury sedans, heels clicking on pavers like an orchestrated overture of status. I eased my car into a space near the side, bypassing the valet line without hesitation. Let them wonder. I sat for a moment in the driver's seat, letting the engine tick into silence. My outfit was simple. Tailored pants, a slate gray silk blouse, flats I could walk in for hours. No glitter, no designer tags screaming their worth. I didn't dress for show. I dressed for movement. The air outside had cooled slightly, just enough to raise goosebumps along my arms. I tucked my clutch under my arm and approached the grand entrance, where a red carpet spilled onto the stone like spilled wine. Cameras flashed, laughter swelled, and then Gideon appeared. He moved fast, but not clumsily. He was too trained for that. He smiled like a concierge, phone in hand, posture loose. "Hey, Marlene," he greeted me, voice just a notch too friendly. "Listen, quick thing. The hosts asked us to strictly enforce the dress code tonight." I stopped mid-step, eyes steady on his. "I'm sorry," I said, like I hadn't heard him correctly. But I had. "It's nothing personal," he continued, that same rehearsed tone. "They just want the event to have a consistent aesthetic, you understand." "Who's they?" I asked calmly. He glanced, barely, over his shoulder. Leora was standing a few feet away, laughing with someone from the country club committee. Her eyes darted toward us, then quickly away. Not even the decency to look guilty. "I'm just the messenger," Gideon said, shrugging. Guests were beginning to slow as they walked past us, catching on to the tension. One older woman, draped in sequins, leaned toward her date and whispered not so quietly, "That's the youngest one." I heard she wasn't really invited. It was the kind of line meant to hurt. And maybe it did. For a second. But I stood a little straighter. "That's unfortunate," I said. Just that. Nothing more. No outburst. No plead. I turned around, one step after another, each more grounded than the last. I didn't storm off. I didn't break. I simply walked away. Back in my car, I sat for a beat. My hands rested on the steering wheel, knuckles pale. Then I started the engine, circled the block, and pulled into the small staff lot behind the hall, under the shadow of the old oak that stretched just enough to cover my car from direct view. I stayed there for a while. No music, no movement. Then I took out my phone and dialed. One call to my lawyer, one to the property manager listed under the holding company I owned, one to the event coordinator who thought she'd been working with a silent investor. Each conversation was brief, polite, but pointed. "If they try to erase me again," I murmured as I stared up at the gilded rooftop visible through my windshield, "they better finish the job, because erasing half a person only leaves you with the sharp edges." I leaned back, phone still in my hand. I didn't need the stage. I didn't need the microphone. They thought power was about being seen. But I knew better. Sometimes the most dangerous seat in the room is the one no one knows you already paid for. They don't realize I don't need their seat. I own the floor they're standing on. They closed the door. I just unlocked a different one. I waited 15 minutes before circling the building. The front entrance was ablaze with laughter, cameras, and curated joy. But the side garden was dimly lit, just enough to guide someone discreetly to a maintenance entrance. I didn't sneak in. I walked, deliberate, straight-backed, the same way I enter a negotiation room, like I already own the outcome. The hallway I stepped into was quiet, carpeted in a deep green that muffled my footsteps. No one stopped me. No one looked twice. That was the thing about dressing unassumingly. People assumed I didn't matter. I passed by catering carts and floral arrangements stacked in the alcove. Someone nodded at me. I nodded back. I wasn't here to crash anything. I was here to reclaim what should never have been denied. And then I saw him. Sterling. My father. He was standing near the entry to the ballroom, looking at a program in his hand, lips slightly pursed, like he'd tasted something off. When he looked up and saw me, he didn't flinch, but his eyes narrowed, always assessing. "You're not dressed appropriately," he said before I even reached him. No hello. "And this isn't the place for tension." "I came to listen," I said calmly, stopping 2 feet from him. "Not to speak." His jaw twitched. "This is not the time for drama." "I'm not here for drama. I'm here for my parents' anniversary." He folded the program, tapped it against his hand, then delivered it. The line I'd heard versions of all my life, but never quite so plainly. "You should know your place, Marlene." And there it was. I exhaled slowly, not surprised, just finished. "I do," I said. That's the difference. I know exactly where I stand. I just stopped asking you to see it." He blinked. For a second, just one, something flickered in his face, but then it hardened. "You've made choices that distance you from the family. You live like a minimalist in a world of expectations. And you think proximity earns you praise," I said quietly. "But showing up in designer suits doesn't mean you show up for people." He looked away. "Respect," I continued, "isn't about titles or dress codes. It's about truth. And if you keep pretending I don't matter, don't act surprised when I stop protecting what you care about." I didn't wait for a reply. I left him standing there and stepped into the ballroom. The energy shifted the moment I crossed the threshold. Guests looked up, some with surprise, some with confusion. A few just stared. I didn't hurry. I didn't hide. I caught Leora's eyes. Her mouth moved in some excuse to the person next to her, and she turned away, walking briskly toward the bar area. The press of her smile thinned with each step. I made my way through the crowd like a ripple through still water. I didn't demand attention, but I didn't reject it either. I wasn't there to provoke. I was there to be present. At a side table near the rear corner, I found an empty seat. Not labeled, not reserved. But there. I sat. No one told me to move. No one offered champagne. I just sat. Legs crossed, spine straight, hands in my lap. And yet, the room shifted around me. Whispers gathered, heads turned, because my existence, quiet and unbending, was louder than any toast they could raise without me. I didn't need a name tag to declare who I was. My presence challenged their narrative. I wasn't seeking validation anymore. I wasn't holding out hope that someone would say, "We were wrong." That moment was gone. What remained was clarity. I didn't come to be acknowledged. I came to stop apologizing for existing. You wanted me out of the picture. Now I'm in the frame, and in focus. The parking lot had only gotten more crowded by the time I returned. Spotlights glared off luxury windshields. Laughter floated from valet attendants, and the line of guests posing for photos outside the entrance snaked toward the curb. But this time, I didn't use the back road. I drove straight up the front loop in my black-on-black Tesla Model S Plaid, smooth and unhurried. I saw the valet's eyebrows lift the moment he recognized the vehicle. I watched him hesitate. He wasn't expecting me again, let alone in this car. Without a word, I stepped out, clicked the door shut, and handed him the key card. Same outfit, same flats, same woman they dismissed, but everything felt different. This time, I wasn't entering quietly. I was stepping into their story with my own narrative intact. As I moved through the crowd outside the entrance, heads turned. The people who had barely looked my way earlier were now suddenly aware of my presence. Murmurs began. Someone behind me whispered, "Is that her?" The one they said wasn't really on the list. Inside the ballroom, the air was crisp with rosewater and chilled wine. Waitstaff moved like trained dancers, weaving through the space with polished grace. I entered without hesitation, walking past the check-in like I had every right to be there, because I did. A few guests nodded at me out of reflex, unsure if I belonged, but not bold enough to stop me. I passed Leora, who was speaking animatedly with two men near the floral archway. She caught sight of me mid-sentence and froze. A smile flickered and died. She turned her body slightly, facing away from me, voice suddenly louder, as if trying to draw the room's attention anywhere but to me. It didn't matter. At that moment, Gideon stepped up to the mic on stage. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced smoothly, "before dinner is served, we'd like to take a moment to thank the anonymous benefactor who made this incredible evening possible." The crowd clapped, some turning toward the stage with polite smiles. Gideon gestured toward the front table where an older couple sat, family friends who owned a winery in Sedona. They stood, modest and confused, and waved awkwardly. I smiled. Tightly. Silently. Because I knew the truth. I didn't correct him. Not yet. I simply kept walking, slower this time, letting myself absorb the way the room reacted to me without understanding why they were reacting. I passed the stage, giving Gideon a subtle nod. His gaze slipped off mine, faltering, and for a second, he looked like a man who realized he was part of the wrong production. Leora was talking faster now, hands moving in wide gestures, as if drowning out my presence with volume. But it didn't work. I wasn't loud. I was precise. Guests began to glance my way more frequently. Whispers shifted tone, curiosity, maybe even suspicion. It didn't take much, a confident step, a familiar face in an unfamiliar role, to throw people off balance. Near the AV booth, I pulled out my phone and opened an email draft I'd written earlier that afternoon. The subject line read, "Correction statement for event press packet." I didn't press send. I just left the screen open, bright in my hand as I strolled slowly past the technicians. No words, no confrontation, just presence. I stopped near the large glass doors leading to the patio and looked over the room. For years, I'd been told silence meant acceptance, that if I didn't speak, I was agreeing. But they were wrong. Silence isn't submission, it's the sound of strategy. The show they staged is about to become mine. The lights dimmed just enough for the room to hush. Silverware paused mid-air. Laughter tapered into expectant silence. Across the ballroom, faces turned toward the projection screen as the MC's voice flowed through the speakers, like silk dipped in nostalgia. Tonight, we celebrate 40 years of love, growth, and the family that made it all possible. I sat at a table near the center, alone but not isolated. My hands rested calmly in my lap. I didn't flinch when the opening notes of the slideshow began. The piano melody was soft and sweeping, underscoring photos of my parents on their wedding day, then beach vacations, birthdays, baby Leora in Sterling's arms. The kind of curated legacy that looked airtight, until it wasn't. At exactly 2 minutes and 35 seconds in, the screen froze, then flickered. For a heartbeat, everything went black. And then it played. Not the intended next segment. Delphine's voice, crisp and unmistakable. "Honestly, she doesn't match the aesthetic. Let's not complicate things. Just don't include her." Then, Leora, laughing lightly. "She's used to it. She'll understand eventually. Or she'll stay quiet like always." Gasps rippled across the room, like a dropped glass on marble. Chairs shifted. Forks hit plates. Someone muttered, "Oh my God!" The AV technician lunged toward the booth. The MC froze, mouth half open, unsure whether to move forward or vanish. Sterling stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. His face went crimson, the veins near his temple visible even from rows away. "This wasn't in the reel," he said under his breath. But it reached more ears than he intended. "And me?" I didn't move. I didn't wince, or lower my eyes, or even smile. I watched. Some guests turned in their chairs, hesitant eyes seeking me out. Not with pity, but with a dawning clarity. A few walked toward my table quietly. One man, one of my father's former business associates, reached out his hand. "Ms. Hayes," he said softly, "that was something. I hope you're all right." I shook his hand. "I've always been all right," I replied, "just not always allowed to be seen." Another guest, a woman in a high-necked navy dress, whispered as she passed, "Good for you." Then she kept walking. From the back of the room, a voice I hadn't heard in years emerged. "Ms. Hayes?" I turned to see Gregory Carson, once my would-be mentor, who had passed on hiring me a decade ago with the line, "You're a little too quiet for leadership." He looked older now, softer, less certain. "I didn't know," he said. "And you've handled this with astonishing composure." I nodded, the corners of my mouth curving slightly. Sometimes silence does more than shouting ever could. Delphine and Leora were already weaving their way to the front, voices hushed but frantic. Leora whispered to the AV crew, her hands slicing the air. Delphine glanced toward me, then immediately away when our eyes met. It was an editing error, she hissed loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. Someone hacked the file or mislabeled it. Sterling hadn't sat down. He stood near the edge of the stage, water glass clenched in his fist, knuckles pale. He stared at the screen like it had betrayed him. I reached for my phone, opened the message I had drafted hours earlier. The subject line read, "Correction to Anniversary Program Credits." Inside, it detailed the full scope of my role. Not as guest, but as silent financier. I didn't hit send yet, but I copied it, pasted it into a new message addressed to the event's press contact, and typed one final line. "If the truth embarrasses you," I wrote, "maybe don't create it." I pressed send. They started the story. I'll finish it. The room hadn't quite recovered. After the clip, the air was a mix of confusion and forced smiles. Some guests tried to pretend nothing had happened, more worried about their place cards than what they'd just heard. Others whispered openly now, stealing glances toward me, and then away just as quickly. I sat still at my table, finishing my glass of water, like nothing was out of place. Delphine and Leora looked like women desperately rearranging a house mid-earthquake. Sterling, still standing, tried to regain control with a sudden clap and a call for attention. "My friends," he began, voice tight, "we all know technical issues can happen. Let's not let a glitch define this beautiful evening. Let's celebrate what matters." Gideon stepped forward from the shadows, voice smooth as a stage actor recovering a lost cue. "Yes, thank you, Sterling. And before we move into dinner, we'd like to extend special thanks to the anonymous benefactor who made this night possible." He gestured toward the same couple they'd wrongly credited earlier. The applause this time was thinner, forced, uneasy. I stood. No rush, no performance. A quiet murmur followed me as I walked down the center aisle toward the stage, envelope in hand. I saw Leora's lips part in panic. Delphine's knuckles whitened around her clutch. Sterling just froze. I didn't speak into the mic. I handed the envelope to the event coordinator, who, caught off guard, opened it and read into the mic before anyone could stop her. "Venue sponsor, Westfield Hall, courtesy of M. Hayes Holdings." Gasps. Not from everyone, but enough. Enough for the walls of fiction to crack audibly. Sterling's mouth moved without sound. Delphine's expression dropped, her practiced warmth evaporating. Leora, mouth open, eyes blinking fast, looked like she wanted to disappear into the centerpiece. I stepped toward the mic, just one breath, one pause. "This evening is beautiful," I said, voice steady, even gentle. Even when I wasn't supposed to be part of it, I was here, literally, under every spotlight, every floral arch, every rented linen napkin. A few guests chuckled, nervous, unsure. I let the silence land. "I'm not here to make a scene, just to clarify one." I looked toward the event staff, nodding. "You made this elegant, seamless. Thank you for carrying what others couldn't." Then I turned back to the audience. "Visibility is powerful, but truth? That's permanent." I left the mic where it was. I didn't wait for applause. None came, and that was the point. No performance, no curtain call, just honesty hanging in the air, thick and unavoidable. I made my way off stage. Guests stood, not to cheer, but to bear witness. Leora tried to intercept me. "You didn't have to do that," she hissed, eyes darting around the room. "You didn't have to make it a thing." I stopped just long enough to meet her gaze. "I didn't make a thing," I said quietly. "I revealed one." Then I kept walking. As I neared the doors, Gideon stepped into my path, arms slightly outstretched, voice low. "You're leaving now? After everything?" I glanced around the room. Everyone was still on their feet, but this time they weren't watching the screen. They were watching me. "I won't stay where I'm not seen," I told him. "I funded the party, but I won't fund the delusion." And with that, I walked out. The heavy doors closed behind me, not slammed, just firm, like punctuation at the end of a long, distorted sentence. I didn't need applause. I needed release. The sun rose over Scottsdale in soft amber tones, painting the edges of my apartment balcony in warmth that felt more like peace than apology. I wrapped myself in a thin shawl and held a mug of coffee, still warm in my hands. The street below was just beginning to stir. Runners, dog walkers, a delivery van easing around the corner. I watched it all with the kind of stillness that only comes after release. Not vindication, not revenge, just a clean, breathless quiet. Last night wasn't playing on a loop in my head. It wasn't haunting me. I wasn't replaying what I said or how they looked. I was just letting it be. My phone buzzed again, screen flashing with unread messages. A long list. I didn't open them. I didn't need to. One from Sterling. We should talk. Leora. You embarrassed all of us for nothing. And Delphine, ever delicate. Please understand, it was never personal. But it was. Every omission, every redirection, every time they swapped my name for a role. It had always been personal. Still, I didn't delete the messages. I didn't block them either. I just let them sit there. That, in itself, felt like a choice. A knock came at the door. Gentle, not urgent. I wasn't expecting anyone. I set the mug down and walked over slowly. When I opened it, I nearly forgot how to breathe. Mrs. Ramirez? She looked older, sure, but her eyes were the same, soft and sharp, like she could still read a room faster than anyone in it. I was in the neighborhood, she said, smiling. Didn't want to let the week end without seeing you? I stepped aside without saying a word and let her in. She hugged me tightly, arms strong despite age. You were always the kindest, she said, voice low. And they knew. We all knew. That's why they told us not to say it out loud. I sat with her in the kitchen, pouring tea as if it were any normal morning. She looked around, nodding approvingly at my bookshelves and the plants that had somehow survived my inconsistent watering. They used to tell us, she continued, not to praise you too much. Said it would upset the order of things, that it wasn't our place to build you up. I swallowed hard. She reached across the table and took my hand. People like you, she said, don't need their praise. You just needed someone to say it out loud, so here I am. We sipped our tea in silence. Not heavy, just true. Healing doesn't mean inviting the infection back in, she said eventually. I nodded. I don't hate them, but I'm not available to be hurt by them anymore. She smiled like a woman who understood that truth better than most. Later that afternoon, after she left with a kiss on my cheek and a reminder to call more often, I headed to my office downtown. The lobby was quiet. My assistant greeted me with a smile and a slight tilt of her head. You're trending, she said gently, as if unsure how I'd take it. I raised an eyebrow. The clip from last night. It's everywhere. Millions of views. People are quoting your line. Visibility is powerful, but truth? That's permanent. I nodded once, walking past her and into my office. Let them watch, I thought. It wasn't for the ones with cameras or microphones or whispers. It was for the woman in a small kitchen somewhere, watching with headphones while cooking dinner. The one who keeps her head down because no one has ever looked her in the eye and said, "You matter." I sat at my desk, opened a folder marked Seed Fund Quiet Builders, and began reviewing the grant applications. There were women in there just like me, only without the push I'd finally given myself. I was never asking to belong. I was remembering I already do. Sometimes the loudest kind of strength is quiet. Not the kind that breaks doors open or slams fists on tables, but the kind that walks away without burning everything down. What I learned through all of this is simple. You don't need to be accepted by the wrong people to be valuable. You don't have to shrink yourself to make others comfortable. And most importantly, you don't owe anyone access to you just because you share a name or a history. If you've ever felt overlooked, underestimated, or erased in your own life, I want you to remember this. Your value isn't up for debate. It's not determined by who claps for you or who acknowledges your seat at the table. Sometimes you build your own table. Sometimes you are the foundation everyone else is standing on. So let me ask you, have you ever had to choose between keeping peace and keeping yourself? Have you ever walked out of a room not because you were defeated, but because you finally knew you deserved more? If this story spoke to you, if it hit something honest inside you, drop a 1 in the comments or tell me where you're watching from. And if it challenged you or even made you uncomfortable, I'd love to hear that too. Real change doesn't start with agreement. It starts with reflection. And if you want more stories like this, real, raw, human, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next one. Your voice, your presence, your truth, it matters here.